Anybody else think this topic sucks? Yeah? All right, thoughts on the correct answer? A lot of folks saying B. Awesome. So topic didn't bother you that much then, huh? I guess I liked it less than you did. So when they say some theorists are mistaken about what is an appropriate goal, what does that really mean? It means it's not a good goal, right? So their goal is a bad one because they can't be value neutral. So because it's difficult to do, therefore you shouldn't try to do it. That's the general principle here, which is like a really discouraging principle. If they're trying to motivate us, they're doing a terrible job. And so B is basically just a generalized paraphrase of the stimulus. And that's actually a really common format for sufficient assumption questions. And it's stupidly simple, but the topics make it difficult. But it's kind of like saying A requires B in the stimulus as an argument, evidence requires conclusion, and a sufficient assumption saying A requires B. The sufficient assumption is assumed to be true in the choices that guarantees the particular situation in the stimulus. So that's like saying if that dog chased that cat as the argument, then we learn as a new sufficient assumption that any dog will chase any cat given the opportunity as a general principle for a sufficient assumption that then applies to the particular case in the stimulus. And so that's the format for question number 14 here. It's just obviously dressed up with technical, theoretical language and philosophical topics and whatnot, but that's just the format. And it's one of the most common formats, actually. And I wouldn't diagram this question or anything, but that's how I think about it. Now, what I've drawn over here is basically how to tell the difference between necessary assumption questions and sufficient assumption questions. The key is the verb or a particular phrase in the question stem. So for sufficient assumption questions, you want words and phrases that are synonymous with sufficiency. So like allows, enables, follows logically if assumed, and properly inferred if assumed. The if is your keyword there, just like in sufficient necessary conditions, if is your sufficient. For sufficient assumption, it also holds true in these phrases. And then allows and enables are also sufficient indicators. Now, necessary assumption, you have words and phrases that are synonymous with necessity, like depends upon, requires, and assumes. So that's how you tell the difference. This particular question says follows logically if assumed, putting it neatly in the sufficient assumption category. They're asking for very different things, so it's extremely important to be able to tell the difference between them. And so you could do questions by type. I have categorizations on my website, breaking them down for the vast majority of prep tests. And basically, you just want to do a bunch of these in a row and a bunch of these in a row, sufficient versus necessary assumption, and you'll start to see the patterns. Basically, sufficient assumption is opening the door to new information that, if true, guarantees the argument 100%, leaving no ambiguity at all. Necessary assumption questions are like a very specific kind of must be true question, where if you assume the argument as given, what needs to be the case in order for the argument to work, not necessarily what will be sufficient for it to work. There is a difference there, and I have articles and videos that go into more depth on that.